What are the main global risks the IMF is dealing with right now? Let's talk about some that they're highlighting. Warning this, quote, uncertainty is the new normal. That isn't what anyone wants to hear, from governments to consumers and on.
The IMF and World Bank both really focus on trade between countries. And anything that sort of interferes or disrupts the trade between countries, they get all uptight and say, oh my God, the world is coming to an end, because the things that ties us together is trade in goods and services between countries. I think what they fail to recognize is the tremendous resilience each country has, the adaptability of the system itself, and really they've underestimated the ability of the system to adapt to the changes that President Trump and his tariff policies have brought about, the conflict countries in Russia, the stresses that have put on the world economy. A lot of the stresses that are in place are being adapted to very quickly. And I think the IMF has underestimated that, which is why you see this flip-flopping of last time there was, oh my God, we have recession all over the world, and now things are not so bad. So I think I'm somewhat ashamed that my colleagues at the IMF are so wishy-washy these days in their forecasting, as opposed to when I was there.
Well, let me take some of their information, because they are expecting a significant downturn next year, perhaps just 0.5% in growth. And you talked about underestimating the resilience, but they have talked about it. And today they said global resistance has not been fully tested. So I'm kind of pushing back on you just a bit here.
You're right. It hasn't been fully tested, but what tests there have been has been a tremendous adaptation, both on the part of the United States in adapting its own policies. That is, what was a 150% tariff became a 17% tariff, right? And that was because there was negotiation in between that allowed capital to flow. That's what the point the IMF and World Bank both miss. We need to have capital flowing between countries to ensure resilience and job creation, which is what the World Bank is focused on.
Okay, let's talk about this adaptation, if you will, because China has managed to keep its ship righted. How has China's steady economic growth and domestic demand contributed, do you think, to the resilience of the global economy amid these trade tensions?
China is a great example of where we had that adaptability. President Xi, 10 years ago, put in place Made in China 2025. He said, we're going to be at the bleeding edge, the forefront of technology in the new technologies, places where the United States has no real role to play yet, because they haven't set the standards in artificial intelligence, robotics, a lot of pharmaceuticals, and that's where China wanted to make its stand. 10 years later, what we find now, China has not only propelled itself forward and made itself more resilient, but it is at the truly leading edge of robotics and a lot of industrial production and the use of artificial intelligence. Not the development of artificial intelligence, but the application of artificial intelligence. So China really is a great example of that resilience showing up.
And let's talk a bit more about the forecast that the IMF has, because do you believe to any degree there's a sense that a greater policy coordination among major economies, especially the United States and China, could help ease this global uncertainty?
Well, let me push back on you on that. It's not so much policy coordination, but rather each country adapting its policies to the changes in the structure it finds in the global economy and its domestic economy. China is trying to get its finances correct. It's trying to get local finances in line with national objectives so that the local governments are not overwhelmed with a tremendous amount of debt and lack of revenue. The United States is trying to get its own house in order also in terms of getting the fiscal picture in line, and it developed a new source of revenues called tariff revenues to try to pay down its fiscal deficit. So I think that's the sort of adaptation that's going on right now, and I think those are the places where we should look for future sources of resilience and investment opportunities for the private sector.
Okay, whether it's trade within a country or trade among nations, let's talk about which regions, which sectors are showing the most vulnerability right now, and which you believe are really proving to be the most resilient.
The hardest ones to get a hold of, I think, right now is what's going on in the energy markets, oil in particular. The conflict with Russia has allowed, despite the sanctions on Russia, there's a tremendous amount of sale of oil by Russia into that black market. India's part of it, China's part of it, even Western Europe is part of it. So there, I think that's where the biggest lack of transparency is, and we don't really know what's going on with oil sales and energy sales. The most resilient part of the economy is, of course, the one that everyone talks about, which is technology, artificial intelligence, and the development of advanced chips all over the world. So much money is going to that now that the U.S. economy, for example, has double-digit levels of investment growth, mostly devoted toward building its AI infrastructure. And China's doing exactly the same thing.